Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
am I on the shared
Yes.
screen?
First of all, I would like to introduce to all of you, all of audience, all of our listeners, and who are watching here now, that we have Joe with us today to teach or to tell us, to instruct us, to present about yoga and meditation, their benefits and the importance of the yoga and meditation. So today, Joe is with us here. Later, if we have any questions, we will ask her. So Joe, can you talk about the yoga and meditation? But before that, please talk about yourself first, about how do you become like interested in yoga and meditation.
Okay.
Yes, here, Joe. Yes.
So, thank you all for coming to this. It's a bit of a surprise to see so many monks. So I've geared my talk towards lay people, but yeah, we'll just feel free to ask me any questions at the end and I'll do my best to answer them. But I can't pretend to be an expert in the Dharma. I'm still very much a student. Okay, so thank you. So when I turned 50, I decided that I needed to begin to look after my body. I became aware of sort of aging and that actually I was responsible for my own aging well. So I went to an ordinary yoga class, which was basically a kind of keep fit. And I enjoyed it and I made progress. And then I had the very good fortune to meet several different yoga teachers from different traditions. So from the Hindu tradition, I met a very wholesome family who really taught about the simplicity of yoga and yoga being about the integration of body, breath and mind. And that yoga was really basically physical yoga practice was only one aspect of what is called the 8 limbs of yoga. And the 8 limbs of yoga also involve pranayama, breath work, a moral code, an ethical code, and meditation, importantly. So I began to incorporate meditation at the end of my yoga practice. Right. I then had the good fortune to meet a Buddhist who, in the Mahayana tradition, who was teaching yoga that he had been taught by monks in northern India. And so what I began to appreciate was that yoga was a kind of standalone practice. It was used by different religions. So it wasn't kind of sectarian in that way. And through him, I began to appreciate how yoga can set you up very well for meditation practice. And since then, well, going back a little bit, what made me kind of search for new teachers was the fact that I'd had a very bad injury brought about by a yoga teacher in the sort of keep fit tradition. And I realized that when I met this family, wholesome family, the Mohans from southern India, that that should never happen in yoga. Yoga is a non-violent practice.
Yes.
And so I began to put the physical practice in the context of moral and ethical behaviour and meditation. I wanted to find a way of developing my meditation practice. And somebody just said, oh, there's a place down the Abingdon Road, it's called Dr. Buddha Vihara or something. Go there, they take anybody. Mm-hmm. So I went with the intention of becoming a better meditator, but without the intention of becoming a Buddhist, which is ultimately what happened. And I found there in the teachings something so rational and logical and so practical. Again, I was very fortunate to have the teachings of Venerable Dhammasami as my guide, as my introduction to Buddhism, really. And since then, that's my pathway. So I do my yoga practice. I find it very beneficial for keeping well, but also for bringing about more mindful psychological states, so that I'm not so distracted in my meditation practice by various aches and pains from sitting. And I think what yoga can really help with is a very good connection with the breath. Mm-hmm. Some things that are very different about the two practices. Well, first, the similarities is that they have codes of ethical and moral codes attached to them, which is not something people associate with modern day contemporary yoga. But in Zen traditions of yoga, in Tibetan heart yoga, and in the Hindu tradition, very firmly, yoga asana embedded in wider practice. But the difference being is that in the Hindu tradition that I started in, there's very much a belief in another force, another energy, a kind of universal deity. So whether you subscribe to a dual or non-dual understanding of that, nevertheless it's there. And I found, coming from a sort of Western educated background, the concept of, and my own experience of being brought up as a Catholic, I found myself having skepticism about connecting with a divine, whether it was within myself or externally. Mm-hmm. And I found that kind of meditation very much took you out of your present situation into another state, which contained a lot of bliss and was very attractive because of that, because you felt very, very good when you achieve some of these higher altered states of consciousness. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they were just facets of mind and just projections of mind. And when you came out of these states, you still had the day-to-day problems to deal with, and you could space yourself out. And that was very pleasant to do. But it wasn't practical in the way that Buddhism is eminently practical. And and so I found the concept, particularly of anatta, really, really helpful and powerful. And another thing that I keep coming back to, which is in the Mangala Sutta, the idea of whatever the worldly conditions are, that one remains sorrowless, stainless, and secure. And that puts you in a better position to help yourself, to help other people. Yeah, but I found the logic, the practicality of Buddhism, it just kind of sat really well with me. So that's a kind of potted history of where I am. And yeah, I don't know if anybody's got any questions.
Yes, can you go on a bit about, you know, how you I've heard that you travel to different places like in Bali, Indonesia, India, like this, to, you know, to join the yoga retreat. Yeah, can you talk about that a bit?
So that has been, so when I was very badly injured by one of these keep fit yoga people, so yoga has the same problem that secular mindfulness has, in that in secular mindfulness, you know, it's been stripped of taken out of Buddhism and commercialized. And that's exactly the same as yoga, in that the physical postures have been taken out of the practice and commercialized. So when I was in that introductory phase into yoga, I was very badly injured. And what took me to India was to find a teacher and to train myself as a teacher, so that that kind of problem didn't arise again, to put out a different model of teaching yoga and practicing, and how to practice without causing self-harm. Because unfortunately, in a lot of yoga studios, a lot of harm is done as well as good. And I can't knock it too much, because that was my introduction, and I feel it's been, you know, it has served me very well as a route into Buddhist practice.
Right.
So I've been to Bali and southern India for yoga trainings with this particular family, and then I've taught a little bit in Scandinavia, and yeah, I mean, I've done a bit of teaching in Europe. I don't know how possible that's going to be anymore with COVID, but yes, but I mean, the thing about yoga is that you don't need to go anywhere. All you need is a little bit of space. You don't need special clothes, you don't need special equipment. You just need, you know, an area that is a bit flat, free of insects and extremes of weather. More difficult to do outside if there's wind, because the wind has the effect of dispersing energy. But it's, you know, the requirements for doing it are very, very simple. And whether you have some sort of physical disability, or you're short or you're tall, or whatever size or shape you are, this doesn't matter. You work from where you are. So, to answer your question.
Yes, my another one is, you know, how do you, how many types of yoga, practice yoga, and what is your recommendation, and the basic one? How many types of yoga?
How many types of yoga? There are many types of yoga as there are teachers, really. And people make up yoga schools sort of overnight. They pop up all over the place like mushrooms.
Yes.
And some people take the commercialization very seriously, and there have been cases where people have tried to take out a patent on a particular yoga posture that people have been doing for a couple of thousand years.
Yes.
There have been some famous cases, particularly in America, that suffered from this, where you have really sort of the power and the adulation,
Yeah.
and what students want to project onto the teacher, very often creates a huge distortion, and so you get abuse of power, and you know, which is really sad and very regrettable in something that is supposed to be a non-violent practice. So, you know, but this is the same with all institutions, all power structures. Yeah, this is why I like this particular family I train with, because, you know, they're well-qualified people. The son is a Western-trained doctor, an Ayurvedic-trained doctor. He's been learning the Yoga Sutra since he was, you know, sort of 5 years old. You know, the mother does, she's in her 70s, she does her yoga practice in her sari. You know, these are just basically good and wholesome people. But I think the thing is that, like meditation, it's some things that you only need, you know, the requirements are absolutely minimal. It's just yourself and your own attention and focus.
Okay.
And the same is very true for yoga practice too.
Yeah. And yes, as you said,
you can do it anywhere. And the important thing is what you learn in your little space is that you take it out into the world. So it doesn't exist just on the mat, just like meditation doesn't exist just on the cushion.
Okay.
That you're taking out.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Joe, yes, as you mentioned, you know, yoga and meditation, they they go together like side by side, and they are all benefit. You know, yoga benefit to our body, and meditation mainly to our mind. So if both of them have proof, health benefits, what are their benefit? Can you tell about, encourage us to more want to practice about yoga?
Well, I guess I would slightly disagree with the premise of the question, that meditation is solely for the mind, because I think if the mind is working well and is healthy, then the body takes care of itself, is also healthy. And the same with yoga, taken in the right context, it produces clarity of thought and a more stable emotions. But it does it for the physical postures, which I think is more of what you're interested in asking about. For the physical postures, the key really is working with the breath.
Yeah.
So that's the key thing, is working with the breath, because anybody, you know, can do kind of like these fancy poses, but actually to get meaning and to bring about physiological change in your system, other than just in the muscle groups, different muscle groups, and in terms of flexibility, you have to work with your breathing.
Yeah. And
that is the key. That is where the transformation takes place.
Yeah.
And it can be quite a powerful transformation. There's a lot of scientific and neuro scientific research on how you can change, you know, your heart rate, your rate of respiration, your brainwave patterns, and you know, lots of physiological beneficial changes can take place. You can certainly like lower your blood pressure, you know, as well as do things like enhance bone density, and you know, appetite regulation just seems to happen automatically when you practice a lot of yoga.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is good, you know, because people are generally getting too fat in the world.
So Joe, is yoga safe, or who shouldn't practice yoga, for example, like physically and maybe mentally? How do you recommend, or can everyone practice yoga? Or?
So, yeah, yoga, I would say yoga is for everyone, but there are qualifications to that. And so one would be, if you have, say, very high blood pressure, there are some postures that are not advisable to do, and some ways of working that are not advisable. If you have detached retina, you shouldn't do inverted postures.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, say, a knee injury, you need to be very careful about how you go about your practice so that you don't stress your joints. But on the whole, yoga tends to improve physical conditions.
Yeah.
But it just depends on, you know, if you're going to kind of keep fit class, you're basically just working muscles. Okay. If you go to like a yoga therapist or somebody who practices yoga and meditation, then you're more likely to have an experience that helps your physical body, helps your immune system, which is important these days. So having resilience is a big component in yoga. Strength, people think flexibility, but it's also about strength and resilience. Good breathing, having a good immune system. Yeah. So you need to, if anybody goes to a teacher or does self-learning, say from a video, then they need to check in with the person running the course and tell them that they have whatever it is, and so that the teacher can modify the postures for them.
Yeah.
So you know, that's important.
Do you have sort of time, for example, in the morning or evening, what sort of time is yoga practicing is better, is more suitable?
So, it depends on what kind of yoga you want to do. So in the morning, I do sort of wake up yoga and energizing yoga. I do something called 5 rights, which is a Tibetan-based practice. And that kind of energizes my body, but in a way that brings everything into the central channel. And I find that then I just go from that straight into meditation practice. So that's what I do every morning. And I pretty much do it, I think, in the last 6 months. Maybe twice I've had to miss. But otherwise I do that every single morning. So, but it just depends on, you know, when is a practical time. You know, evening times, it's better to do a kind of slower practice that is more restful and more conducive to sleep. And you can use yoga as a kind of self-treatment for, referring back to your last question, you know, many ailments, say for insomnia, there are good yoga postures to practice. You know, if you have like a scoliosis of the spine, there are good practices to do. And depending on whether you want to be awake and alert or whether you want to be feeling more rested, it would depend on what time of day you did the practices, really.
Yes. Yeah,
So
thank you.
your common sense and judgment. And the thing is, don't do it after eating a heavy meal. And,
yes. I will going to ask two Venerable as well. They are also, practicing, I think they have the knowledge of yoga as well.
right.
So Venerable Damsira, anything that you want to question or add to the, the saying of Joe here, please, yes, please have any comment.
So as for me, like in India, they have got a religious channel called Asta channel. So in the Asta channel, every morning at 6 of the morning, they like teach yoga. And my mom is a great fan of the Baba Ramdev. She just wakes up at like 5:45 and she will do like switch on the TV and like do the practice.
Okay.
So, and as for me personally, before I went to the Nalanda University in Bihar to teach over there, like I always used to think that, oh, yoga is something to do with the physical activity.
Yeah.
Then when I attended the yoga class, they were teaching about the 8 Ashtanga, the 8 different, the divisions or the subdivisions. And also recently I came to through the YouTube, I came to know that there's a meditation called transcendental meditation, following after the words, the following after the sounds. Yeah, the following after the sounds.
Yeah.
So in the Baba Ramdev, he tells you to cool down one's mind, to stabilize the mind. Like they tell you to visualize the letter O. Like that. So I'm just wondering, like when you teach the types of yoga, like do you teach like the transcendental meditation, just follow visualizing the letter Om and following that sound?
No, I don't personally, because more and more I infuse my yoga teaching with Buddhist teaching. And I find that those kinds of things, they're very good for concentration practice, maybe. So that's helpful, but it's just an aspect. And what I find with those things that can take you into a bliss state, a state where you're feeling really good, is that they can end up by being highly addictive. So, when I really got into Indian style yoga, I could sit and I could quickly go into what's called a hypnagogic state, where you have visualizations. So I would have my eyes open and I would see things, maybe creatures or an eagle or something like this. And what I've learned is that those are just phenomena of the mind, and they can be very distracting unless you have the skill in interpreting them. And I know many people who've kind of lost their way in yoga because they've invested too much into that kind of practice, and then they start to believe that they have these special powers and siddhis, and people can get into a state of close to mental breakdown, actually.
Yeah.
If it's not really anchored to the real world. And for me, that's what Buddhism does, is that it anchors your experience in the real world. It says, this is what is important, not going off into some bliss state, no matter how attractive it is. This is where we are. Whatever your belief system is, you've got this body as your vehicle for this lifetime. That's what you need to inhabit. And, you have to deal with the real world problems and difficulties and frustrations, and be able to respond appropriately and not get lost in some escapist thing. So it's very attractive, and occasionally I add things like that into my practice if I feel I need it. For instance, in yoga, there's you find that there's a practice called Nadi Shodhana where you breathe through alternate nostrils. And in meditation, I can do things because of yoga, like if my thinking is kind of like very heavy and very practical, if I breathe more through, say, my left nostril, so I can close my right nostril, then that kind of lifts and lightens my practice. If my practice is kind of going off here somewhere, then if I breathe through my right nostril, it kind of focuses my attention back into my thinking, back into my Buddhist practice. So things like that are really kind of useful. But the problem I find with TM is that the people I know who've got into it, they have that 20 minutes a day when the world is lovely, but then they have to face the practicalities of everyday life and being in the office and that sort of thing. So it produces wonderful states, but for me, it's not as practical as the kind of meditation that I've been trained to do at OBV, for instance.
And rather than, let's say, like, rather than reciting the O, so how about the singing bowl meditation, like, ping? No, yes, you have.
Yeah, there we
go. Like, so sometimes, like, so, yes, sorry.
That sound, Om, the universal sound, you can set up amazing resonance in your whole body. So you start in the belly, don't you? And then it moves up into this center here. And it's an amazing feeling when you get it going. And it's so powerful when you do it, say, in a group of, 100 people. The reverberation is amazing. And it connects you in a really beautiful way. And the people who do it best, in my experience, are monks in the Mahayana tradition.
The Joe.
You can download
Joe.
on YouTube. You get lots of lots of recordings.
Joe. I've been telling to the students, let's say, when the Buddhism start flourishing in Tibet. Yeah. So normally, what do we say is the three refuge, right? The Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. I take refuge of Buddha, I take refuge of Dharma, I take refuge of Sangha. But when the Buddhism started flourishing in Tibet, the Tibetan masters, they added another one on it. I take refuge of my Guru. So they kept the Guru in the beginning. Yeah. Then the second, the Buddha, the third, the Dharma, the fourth, the Sangha. Now, and also there is a quotation. Most of the people now these days, they use the quotation of the Buddha. Buddha, what he said was, you are master of yourself. So now these days, lots of youngsters, they just bring that quotation, you are master of yourself. So I don't have to learn from anyone. I can learn from the YouTube, I can learn from the Google, I can learn from the Wikipedia. So I used to tell them, rather than saying, I take refuge of Guru, you can say, I take refuge of YouTube, I take refuge of Google. but on the, let's say, on the Google, like, you don't like get all information. Some are fabrication, like sometimes like they are wrong information. So the Kamala Shila, what he said was, first listen, understand, then realize. So now these days, like lots of youngsters, they just take and they try to learn from the Google and the YouTube, and they take it literally, right?
Yeah. And also the problem is that it's harder to use your faculty of discrimination when you're seeing something on a screen, I feel. You're only seeing a kind of two-dimensional representation, yeah, of somebody's teaching. And it doesn't get around this problem of kind of gurudom, which is really, really big in India and Hinduism.
Yeah.
And you get these kind of charismatic people. You get it in all religions, all walks of life. You know, and you know, in politics, people who love Donald Trump, or you know, you have to be really, really careful. And this is what I love about Buddhism, is that it teaches you self-responsibility, and that you must assess for yourself, and you must check it out from yourself. And that's very different from saying, I don't need any teachers, because actually everybody needs teachers. When we're little, we learn to speak because our parents have been teaching us all the time how to speak, how to eat properly, how to select foods that are good for us. We learn to read, we learn to write, we learn to use a computer. These things aren't, you know, inborn. We have teachers all the way through our lives. And I just consider myself to have been extremely fortunate in the teachers I've had for yoga. So injury set me on that path of trying to find good teachers. And in meditation, in Buddhist teaching, I've been very fortunate with my teachers. And,
I have one question.
Venerable Shanta, please.
Okay, so my name is Shanta. So actually,
recognize you from So Wide. You were a So Wide scholar?
yes. This year I stuck here. Still I'm in Oxford. Enjoying. Well, yeah. So I did also yoga course from Kerala, Shivananda Yoga.
Oh yeah, Shivananda. No.
Yeah, so I've been doing actually 15 or 10 years here.
Right.
So I've been doing yoga and meditation and this, you know, I still have a doubt. So maybe you are a most senior, maybe you've been. So I have one question. Like if you have achieving we, of course, everybody wishing to achieve the enlightenment or, you know, nirvana. So which method, like the very quick nirvana, like through the yoga or through meditation? What do you have any like?
So I would say it's individual, all individual, so I can only talk for myself. But it depends what you think nirvana is.
Yes.
And I think people have different ideas about nirvana. So I think a lot of people think that it's, you know, it's like pulling a switch and these kind of neon lights start, or fireworks start exploding around you, and you're in some kind of happy state forever. Personally, I don't think nirvana's like that. I think it's this thing about being centered, being secure, being able to meet whatever happens with compassion and with, with compassion, with joy, with, just being able to meet all the difficulties in that way, whilst not being upset yourself, you know, retaining your humanity, but being able to respond to a situation with wisdom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it depends on what you think. So for me, meditation is, if I could only do one, if I had to choose between yoga and meditation, it would be the kind of meditation that I do, that I have been taught at OBV, actually. It's
Yeah,
very
you're right. Yeah, actually,
practical.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
But
it's
yoga means
more
in
secure.
Sanskrit.
It's more secure. It's more definite. You know, um, it's more rooted in reality because
Okay.
it's based on the Four Noble Truths.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
right, right. Yeah, yoga means in Sanskrit said yoga. Yoga means, you know, the joining, like mind
yeah,
and body, you know, the
yeah.
yoga. So joining. So in
But you
this
see,
case,
people think that the mind and body are separate entities, but are they?
well,
Are
they,
mind and body separate entities? I've just read a paper last week um, about the development about what consciousness is. It was published in the New Scientist, 27th of June. So it's a scholarly scientific paper, and now neuroscientists are thinking that the development of consciousness first starts in the heart. The impulses to the heart, the information goes from the heart to the brain, which then develops it into a conscious thought, develops that sensation. So
it
really
is gross
important
level.
for the
Yeah.
treatment of anxiety and depression, and a lot of work has been on soldiers with PTSD. So rather than treating them with psychotropic drugs, like antidepressants, antipsychotic medication, they're going to treat them with heart medication. I mean, I would say, of course, treat them with yoga and meditation. So yeah, so even in the scientific community, there's an understanding that this mind-body connection, it's not, we don't need to connect, it's already connected.
Yeah.
It's already connected, it's just that we're so used to not listening to our bodies, not listening to the information, not seeing what actually is out there to see. So both yoga and meditation and Buddhism teach us, I believe, to be observant. That's the first thing. You know, in meditation, what do? We sit down, we observe the breath, and then we begin to observe our thoughts. We have to do that before we can bring any analysis to bear. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yes. Venerable Tenzin, what do you respond to this question?
We have to meet up.
As for the consciousness, the science, what do they think is mind is a derivative of a brain. It's like one of the Indian old school, like the Charvaka. They just believe in what they see. They don't believe in what they don't see.
Yeah.
So the science, they believes in the numbers and the logic. So like the same way, the science, what do they think is mind is a derivative of a brain. When the brain dies, the mind dies.
Yeah.
But as for the Buddhism, when we talk about, let's say, the consciousness can be divided into three things: subtle, gross level, subtle level, very subtle level. As for the gross level, eyes consciousness, nose consciousness, ears consciousness, it's very much related to the brain.
Yeah.
Then when we talk about the subtle consciousness, then it happens during the time of deep sleep. When we go to a deep sleep, the science that talks about the five senses, but as for in the Buddhism, and the Buddhism, we talks about the six senses, like the mental consciousness. So these five consciousness, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, physical, it dissolve into the six mental consciousness at the time of deep sleep. So the proof is when it dissolves into the mental consciousness, when someone tries to open my eyelids by saying like, look, 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 and we won't be able to see it. And when they talk to us, we won't be able to hear it. And when someone brings kind of like my best food, I won't be able to smell it. I know I won't be able to taste it. And someone try to wake me up, like in the beginning, I won't feel it. Then this is another level of consciousness, the subtle level. Yeah. And the very subtle level, the consciousness will come at the time of death. So what do we call is that the people who does a meditation, not only the people who does like the meditation, death meditation, most of the people, they experience the clear light what do we call is the clear light in the end when the death comes. But the normal people, they won't understand and they don't realize what that clear light is, even though they are experiencing it. But as for the people, the highly great practitioners, they can like understand the very subtle level of consciousness. So that's why the people, in the Tibetan, we call it Thuktam. So in English, they call it like clear light meditation. So they are clinically dead, but their body still remain fresh. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama's the senior tutor like stayed a meditation for like 13 days. Another High Lama like the 20-something days. And recently, some of the nuns and the monks at the time of the quarantine during the lockdown, they also stayed the meditation. So in the end, what it says is it clearly proves that the very subtle level of consciousness doesn't have to depend upon the brain. So though clinically they are dead, the mental is still very much alert and active. So that's why now these days, with the collaboration between the Wisconsin University and with the Tibetan Dedek Hospital and the Tibetan Menzikang, the way we practice both the homeopathic and the allopathic. So what do they do is when they comes to know that when some Tibetan, they were like staying a clear light meditation, they just go down and they do the test, and they send all the reports to the Wisconsin University, and they're doing a research on it.
Great. I mean, really interesting. But I think that what some scientists are saying now is that it's not just in the brain, but actually it's the heart first. We just think of the heart as a muscle, but it's more than that. And so that means when people are in a vegetative state and there's brain activity, it doesn't mean to say that if you just switch off the machine, by switching off the machines, does that person still have consciousness? Given that it seems they're thinking now, and this is new research, I'll try and find the article and post it, that actually the heart is involved in consciousness. It's quite, so this is very new, just published like 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure which American university it is that's done the work, but
normally
I'll find the reference and give it to Venerable Mahasena. I've already sent it to Venerable Dhammasami
actually
to look at. But I know that so I haven't achieved that clear light state in meditation, but I've experienced something like that when in childbirth, when I nearly died, and I just found myself going down this sort of white light tunnel, and where your body is like and brain is shutting down basically. So
there's a book written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama called The Advice on Dying. So normally when someone has to go so let's say when someone is dying, they have to go through the 8 different stages. Different stages. So during these 8 different stages, so in the death meditation on death. So meditation on death, it's one has to visualize as if how these 8 stages it occurs. And when the first stages comes, how does it affect the brain, the external and the internal? And when the second stages comes, how does it affect the external and the internal? So some of the people, what do they think is doing a dead meditation and impermanence and all these things. Like in the West, it's to talk on the like dead, dying, sickness is kind of a taboo, isn't it? But in the East, like it's more of like open-minded. But the thing is, like, it's not to make oneself a remorse and oneself to feel sad. It's more of like turning the negative time into a positive thoughts.
Yeah.
So at that time, like,
it's a negative time. Is it a negative time?
No, negative time. No, not only like this time. Like negative time, we are talking about at the time of death. in the like, let's say the people who don't accept the reality and people who don't accept the impermanence, when the death comes, they die. Sometimes they die out of fear, anger, frustration, hatred, jealousy, and all these things. So one doesn't get a peaceful death, right? So over here, the meditation, oh, okay, though I'm dying, it's okay, it's impermanence, I shouldn't get attached to it, and the death is not an end, it's just a beginning. Then trying to visualize how when the earth dissolves into the water, and water dissolves into the fire, fire dissolves into the air dissolves into space, how does it affect? And what are these different signs like that? So now when we talk about the consciousness, they are like normally, let's say, as for the moral basis, the moral values, almost all the religions, they talks about the same thing, no matter whether it's a monotheology or polytheology, whatever it is. But when it comes to the tenets, the view, especially on the self, the three main questions arises. The self, does it have a beginning? Does it have a continuation? Does it have an end? So if it does it have a beginning, then next the question comes is, what is self, right? So in the lower class and also in the let's say high class, like there are lots of arguments, especially on the emptiness, the shunyata. So the self, is it a separate entity from my body, or my body itself is a self, or my consciousness is a self, or then if the consciousness is not separate entity from my body, and if it's my body itself is not self, if my consciousness is not self, then what is self? Then what's the characteristics of it? Oh, lots of argument.
Okay, then I think we come back to the yoga a bit about that as well. So Joe, why nowadays, Joe and everyone, yoga and meditation practicing become more and more interesting and popular in the nowadays, not just in Western, I think in everywhere in the world now, they like yoga and meditation practice thing.
Well, I think, increased communication through digital networks is one factor. I mean, with Buddhism, clearly, the Tibetan situation of the diaspora from Tibet has had a huge influence on spreading Buddhism into the West, and then other traditions have followed. Also, people travel to Southeast Asia in particular. That has, and they've seen monks and how people are in Buddhist countries. So, I mean, all these things, bring the practices to attention of people.
Yeah.
But I think also these are practices that work, that deliver results. And I think people are under such pressures, and we are encouraged to be distracted from reality the whole time. For instance, here with COVID, now the lockdown is easing, people are being told it's your sort of duty as a citizen to go out and shop and buy lots of stuff that you don't really need, and in order to keep the wheels of capitalism going round and round and round.
Yeah.
And all these sort of pressures to be this kind of person, that kind of person, look this way, look a certain way, achieve this, work your way up the ladder for that. People are really exhausted.
Yeah.
Caring for death.
And not because they take away from the reality, which again is, the Four Noble Truths, and how we actually work with that so that we can be more free, more happy, more appropriate. and bring benefit to other people.
Yeah.
So that was my, I don't think we've got any time to do any practical yoga, but I will say that when I do yoga practice, intention is really, really important. So the intention, so Venerable Mahasana, when we worked together,
Yes.
we very much worked in a way to lay a foundation for sitting in meditation and developing our metta practice.
Yes.
For instance, so we've worked a lot with opening heart space in the practice. And I think if you know what you're doing with yoga, you can kind of, manipulate sequences to produce by kind of opening up areas of the body or bringing awareness of the subtle body into your practice. You can actually create a kind of a mood or, settle yourself in such a way that it's very natural to move straight into a meditation practice that has a particular kind of focus. So that's what I'd like to end on.
Yes, that's very
But
good.
even if you just do physical kind of, physical jerks, as we call them, it can be just very beneficial, just looking after your physical body, because it is the only one that you have in this lifetime.
Yes.
And it's good, even if you're just taking responsibility for yourself in that way, very, basic way. It's a positive thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
As for me personally, when I see my mother, my late mother, doing yoga exercise, pranayama and all these things, I used to think that it's just a wastage of time. Then at that time, I was just learning the sutra. Then later on, when I started learning the tantra, when I became a senior and started learning tantra, then I realized that, oh, this is so important. So in the tantra, it talks about the channel, the wind, and the drops. And also in terms of the winds, there are like 10 major winds and the 10 minor winds. And all these pervasive winds, life-bearing winds, it's very much related with the pranayama, like on the gross level basis.
Without the breath, because you can lose your mind, can't you, have a derangement through mental illness, or you can lose a part of your brain or have a disease.
Yes.
But you're still who you are. But if you lose your breath, you're finished.
Yes, very much true.
And we know that, especially now. So, paying attention to the breath awareness, and it contains so much information. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. Yes, very much true.
It's really interesting, the different mental effects you can create by manipulating the breath. But without the breath, stop breathing. That's it. It's game over.
Yeah. So when
next life, but who knows?
When we come into this world, first what do we do is inhale, then started crying, like that. Then at the time of death, what do? We inhale, then exhale for the last time. Then bye-bye. Then the famous yogi, the Tibet that has ever produced the Milarepa, and the Milarepa, what he said was, why you are afraid of death? The death is in between the inhale and exhale.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the yoga and the meditation, it's so fascinating. And the Sujata has said to the Siddhartha, isn't it? Healthy mind comes from the healthy body. Yeah. And in return, the Siddhartha said to the Sujata, healthy body comes from the healthy mind.
Mind, exactly. That's why I'm saying, if I do one thing, it would be, if I had to choose, it would be meditation. And but yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
That's why I call yoga. Yoga means healthy body, then healthy mind. Yoga is in a relation with
Connection.
mind and body.
Yeah.
Very much
Interdependent.
true.
True.
Very much true.
Okay,
Very
we'll
much true.
meet up in Oxford and do some yoga with Venerable Mahasena when it's permitted.
Yes, we do it.
The difference between the Shivananda approach and, you know, like I say, every teacher is different. So, you know, and my approach.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Joe. I think we don't have time to do the physical, I mean the practical way.
Yeah.
We just do the chanting. So thank you very much,
Thank
Joe, and
Thank you.
Venerable Chanta, Venerable
Thank you.
Sula. Thank you very much for all of you to be here today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for
Indeed,
everyone.
thank you very much. Yes.